Hi Mete, it's great to be here with you today. Thank you for joining us. Could you just briefly tell us a bit about what you do as Deputy Mayor?
Hey Phoebe, it's great to be with you here today. So as the Deputy Mayor of London for Environment and Energy, my job is to make sure that we're able to make sure that the green transition really helps support Londoners. So whether that's more access to green space across our city, cleaning our rivers, lower energy bills, creating new jobs for young people for the future, and we're ultimately doing our bit in the world to tackle the climate crisis.
Brilliant. And on the topic of the climate crisis, why is it important that we act now to tackle the climate emergency?
Well, you only have to look to see what's happening around the world, or even in London in 2021, we had flash floods in London. Loads of basement flats across the whole city were really badly flooded. People were really impacted by the impacts of climate change. We know that we had the hottest temperatures on record in London over the past few years. And again, our homes aren't built for those levels of temperatures, and that particularly affects some of our most vulnerable residents in London. And so part of my job is making sure that we know at the same time that most of the communities who've done the least to cause the climate crisis, communities like mine, where I'm from in Hackney, I make no secret I'm not a traditional environmentalist. I grew to care about this issue partly because, when I used to go home and see my parents, for example, open up their energy bills and they see their energy bills year on year end increasing because we're dependent on fossil fuels. And every time something happens around the world, who pays more for it? It's working class Londoners. Communities who've done the least to cause the air quality and climate crisis are those who are suffering the most. So for me, this is as much about tackling and really pushing forward social justice, racial justice and economic justice for working Londoners as much as it is around environmental justice.
Absolutely, thank you. And moving to the topic of green skills and that side of the economic and ecological initiatives, how would you define green skills?
I think it can exist in lots of different industries. If you take what we're doing around rivers and cleaning rivers in London over the next 10 years, if you think about all the water quality engineers that you're going to need, for example, all of the community engagement that happens around that, those are green skills. If you think about, our acceleration around improving more access to green space, more tree canopy across the city, those are green skills, green jobs. Green jobs and green skills basically exist in all sectors. Transport, for example, we've got the biggest zero-emission bus fleet in the whole of the Western world. Over 2,000 zero-emission buses in London. And if you think about all of the jobs that are going to be created out of that, those are green skills and green jobs that we're going to be needing as well. The transition to a green economy is happening. The question is, how do we make sure that these people aren't disproportionately impacted by the transition? It's about how do we support people who've been doing the trade for a long time, make sure they've got the right skills and training that they need to be able to transition into something that's much more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've sort of touched on this already, but just for some clarity, what career opportunities do you see as existing and growing in the green sector?
There's so many. One of the key areas that we're working on is thinking about how do we make sure our buildings are much more energy efficient. We know that people are really struggling with the cost of living and all the other financial pressures that they're facing at the moment. So as part of that, what we're trying to do is making sure we've got a plan to improve energy efficiency across 22,000 homes in the next 2 years. It's the largest ever retrofit that will happen across our city, and that's part of a new approach that we've taken from City Hall. Now, if you think about all the jobs that are going to be needed to really accelerate our retrofit, right now we've got a massive shortage around retrofit. And these are people who, for example, are going to insulate homes, for example, change the windows, address issues around damp and mold. People are already doing these jobs in some aspects, but it's about how do you retrain them to make sure that they're doing it in a much more way that's more sustainable. But the problem is that the people with the skill force just isn't there. So if you think about the people who are qualified to do solar panels, we just don't have enough people. And so my job is making sure that, for example, like in industries like that, we're able to get more jobs.
Brilliant, thank you. And the London Growth Plan talks about the inclusive talent strategy for London and the coordination of a massive investment in green skills. So what will that mean for colleges like those within our Mayor's Green Skills Academy?
Look, ultimately, we must never forget that we're talking about people. And so the question is about who benefits, right? So what the London Growth Plan does, not just about creating jobs, but it's about equity. It's about making sure that, black and global majority groups across London, women, young people, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are able to benefit from some of this transition. So that's why the London Growth Plan not only sets out the scale and the ambition that we need to really think about, you know, how we support Londoners in terms of growth. And, you know, if we truly realise the ambitions of the London Growth Plan, we know that Londoners will be £11,000 better off. But at the same time as well, it's about making sure that we're co-designing, co-producing, working with Londoners, particularly some of these groups that I mentioned. And actually, how do you make sure that they actually benefit from the jobs that will be created out of it? So the inclusive talent strategy is really all about that. It's about saying, okay, we know all of these things are going to happen. How do we intentionally make sure that we're actually supporting people who've traditionally not really been able to benefit from some of these opportunities? So that's what I'm really pleased to see as part of the London Growth Plan.
Amazing. How can green skills training future-proof career progression, and why is that also important for London's growth plan?
One of the key pillars of the London Growth Plan is our net zero ambition to reach net zero by 2030. We're very proud that London has taken huge, bold steps to reach net zero, particularly at a time in a world where we know that there is a challenging environment around net zero. And we're doing it because ultimately we know that this is very much about protecting our planet for future generations. People feel like a sense of security over their job. And so we very much sort of see the London Growth Plan and the sort of the skills and the jobs that we created, both in terms of like giving longevity to new generation of talent to really sort of benefit from the growth that will happen across our city, but also as a way to strengthen some of our workers' rights in our city as well.
Absolutely. And I'm aware you've worked with young people a lot, and you've got your MBE for services to young people. In terms of that kind of future generations initiative, where do you see being the best routes for young people to kind of exert their voices within discussions about London's climate?
This is an area where I'm really passionate about, which is about how do we make sure that young people have a role to play in not only shaping our environmental action across our city, but also fundamentally the future of the neighbourhoods. London shouldn't just be a place where you live to work. It should be a place where you live because you enjoy living here. Also recognising that lots of our residents, for example, don't have a choice about where they live, or don't have the financial means to say, hey, I think it's really bad air quality here, so therefore I'm going to go off and rent and buy somewhere else. Sometimes you can have great policy, great ideas, but if you don't do how you do it properly and how you work with communities to deliver it, sometimes it can make those policies redundant. And so a big part of what we're doing for this year's London Climate Action Week is we're going to be hosting the first ever youth summit, which is all about basically empowering Londoners to take climate action. And that's really about, you know, creating a sense of shared mission. So it's not just my mission for London, Sadiq's mission for London, and the Mayor's mission for London, but actually this is, you know, collectively we're all working together, and people feel a real buy-in around that. But also, if I could be honest, I think often young people, you know, I remember when I was like much more younger, is that I think they've got much more like interesting ideas, right? What we want is we want fresh perspective ideas. We you know, sky's the limit. Let's be bold for our city, and that's why I'm really pleased that we're going to be working with young people to really shape forward our next climate action plan.
Brilliant. And is there a way that young people can get involved with London Climate Action Week in the summit?
Yeah, so there's going to be loads of things happening during London Climate Action Week. There's going to be hundreds of events. Every day is themed around something different. So Monday is about greening our city. So we're going to be making a big announcement around what we could do to really help support grow more access and help nature flourish across our city, particularly for some of our most underserved communities. Tuesday is going to be all around, you know, London's role globally and how we're working with other cities to drive climate action, particularly where we know we need to see leadership going into COP30 in Brazil later this year. Wednesday is going to be how do we do this growth and green together, which is around London's growth plan and green finance and accelerating that. And Thursday is going to be really around empowering Londoners to really take action on our climate objectives. And basically, there'll be lots of events that young people can attend. There'll be a way in which you can, you know, register to attend the Youth Climate Summit. I really want to make sure that Youth Summit becomes like an annual day every year.
While we're on the topic of London Climate Action Week, could you tell us a bit more about the goals of the festival and why London's so well placed to host the events?
Yeah, look, I mean, not to be too political about it, but we're living at a time where unfortunately we've got a climate denier in charge of the most powerful country in the world. And right now the world is crying out for leadership. London has a huge role that it could play in terms of, you know, inspiring climate action across the world. And so partly the reason why this year's London Climate Action Week is really important, given the wider political context of everything that's happening, is that there is now a big focus on London to really be that sort of convening power where we can bring together, you know, all of the sort of community-led groups to really sort of lead this change, but also achieve some of our wider objectives as well. So I'm really hopeful that this is the start of something bigger, and again, another way in which we're able to showcase how London and why it's the best city in the world.
Amazing, looking forward to it. Could you tell us, please, a bit about the Mayor's Green Skills Academies programme and what it specifically seeks to achieve in relation to London's climate action, and why colleges and universities like those in our partnership are the focus?
Colleges and universities are really important as part of the Mayor's Green Skills Academy. What we want to do is we want to work with industries or people who are already doing incredible work and understand what the solutions are to some of these complex challenges that we face. And so really through this program, what we're able to do is really make sure that we're able to develop and devise a plan that can help support the next generation of talent in the best way possible. And that's why the Academy in many ways is so successful, is because it's not just about sort of, channeling our resources in the right and most effective way, but it's also about really understanding, what are the needs from the sector, because ultimately your ears are like ground to the floor, right? Like you know exactly what like your community needs and what their sort of aspirations are, and for us it's about how do we actually really respond to that rather than sort of just everything being designed by us. So that's why it's really important.
Brilliant, thank you. And with the Mayor's Green Skills Academies programme, how does it particularly support training and careers in the green sector?
Yeah, so there's lots of different sectors that we spoke about, particularly like types of green skills that we're looking at targeting. So I spoke about retrofit, for example. One of the other areas that I didn't speak about is, for example, I've been having lots of conversations around what do we do with heat and excess heat in our city. And there's going to be in the future, and you see this in some of the Scandinavian countries, for example, you have lots of what we call district heat networks. These are jobs that exist probably for like maybe 30, 40 years time, 30, 40 years length of duration, because it's like, it's basically how you fundamentally like power your buildings. Like there's a very interesting project that's happening right now in South Westminster, which is about using the heat from the River Thames, but also from the tube there, and using that excess heat to then basically power Parliament, National Gallery, and other buildings of significance in that area. Now, if you think about all the jobs that are going to be needed to be created to essentially run that district heat network, but also, that heat network isn't going to go away anywhere. It's going to need to be operational. These are jobs that are going to exist, as I say, for like 30, 40 years period. And so the Green Skills Academy and that's why it links very well with what we're doing with the growth plan, is because it's really about, it's two things, right? It's about thinking fundamentally is, where is our economy heading? What types of jobs are we going to need, whether it's around retrofit, whether it's like heating, whether it's like access to green space, whatever it may be, around tech, whatever it may be, and thinking about, we need to now prepare and make sure that we've got the right skills and people ready for those jobs, so that when we do have that investment in London, we've actually got the people who are benefiting from it. Now, what may happen is, and this is the bit that we don't want to fall into the trap of, is that sometimes you may end up in a situation where I went to visit, for example, the London Olympic Stadium, and we installed 3,200 solar membranes on the roof of the stadium. And the company I was working with, Amoresco, who done the installation, I was asking them, saying like, how many of your people who worked on installing the solar panels were local? And like very, very little. Now they want to do more, but they just didn't have the right skill set in London. So in the end, what happened is they had to bring lots of people from outside of London to do it. That's great as well, because London has a big role to play in helping uplift other parts of the country. But a big part of what we're trying to do is making sure that the jobs that are being created in London are also available and accessible to Londoners. And that's why the Mayor's Green Skills Academy is really important.
So talking specifically about trying to get Londoners working in the green area in the capital, what would you say to people considering going into the sector within London who are a bit uncertain whether it's the industry for them?
Yeah, look, firstly, green skills is like every other job. So it's like there's no like one type of green job or green skills, for example. And it's like going into any new industry, right? Which is like, there'll be, in many ways, it's so exciting because, as I say, it provides you with that longevity of it being more sustainable. Because like you're going into an industry which has got a length of time in front of you. So you're not going into an industry which may or may not exist in 5 or 10, 15 years time. So if you think about the heat pumps that we're going to be installing, the solar panels, the maintenance around it, there's clean tech, there's all the different types of jobs that can come from green jobs. So it's not, I think often it's like what part of the big misconception is that it's almost like there's like green jobs here, and there's all these jobs here, but actually at some point these two things will overlap, and what will happen is all of these jobs that what we know and all these skills that we know, they will essentially have more sustainable versions of them, but it will still be the same industries, if that makes sense. So you'll still be, there's not a difference of like, you know, it's not like we're now closing all of these things and then we're opening up a new wave of jobs, and so I think it's very exciting in so many ways, because I actually think that's partly the way we address some of the inequalities that we also see across our city as well.
Brilliant. And in terms of just staying on the Mayor's Academies topic for now, what are your hopes for the outcomes of the Mayor's Green Skills Academies programme?
Look, my biggest hope from the Academy is really what we can achieve is, one is around really making sure that actually some of the groups of people across society who've least benefited from the current economic system that we live in terms of like the inequalities that we have across our society, are able to benefit from the Academy, and actually we're able to empower, give tools, for example, to people who ordinarily wouldn't have those opportunities, and to really get ahead of the game and to benefit from that green transition.
Yeah, and I think what's so great with the Academies programme is the fact that there's this push on underrepresented Londoners being able to access these skills.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great to see. Circling back to the London Growth Plan, the Climate and Ecological Emergency has been cited as one of the 6 big shifts that will shape the reinvention of London. What does that mean for students at colleges like London South East colleges?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I think partly the reason why it's been cited in the London Growth Plan is because I think often when we talk about climate change, we often talk about it from the perspective of like the doom and gloom, right? And in many ways, like, and we have to, but I think actually what happens is sometimes it can feel quite overburdening for a lot of people. And I think people feel like, okay, but I'm one person, what can I do? Actually, like, London is one city, there's like hundreds and thousands of cities, for example. And so why don't you go pick on the big fossil fuel companies while you're talking to me, for example? That's usually like some of the conversations that I'll have sometimes with people. Whereas actually, we're not just doing this because, you know, we have to do this to protect our planet. Of course we are, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation. But actually, why wouldn't you want to live in a world, for example, with better air quality? Why wouldn't you want to live in a world, for example, with better access to green space, you know, cleaner waterways, lower energy bills, better green jobs, you know, all of the benefits that really come out from it. As a part of what the London Growth Plan really is hoping to achieve through the inclusion of why sort of the climate and ecological status that sits around there, is because it's really trying to excite Londoners about the green transition. The green transition, in my opinion, is one of the biggest economic opportunities of the 21st century. It's a huge opportunity for how we can think about how we can redistribute wealth, particularly to working class Londoners and some of those underrepresented groups as well, to really benefit from that. And so for me, it's about, as much as it being about protecting and preserving our planet, it's also about actually thinking about fundamentally all of these big inequality issues. Like if you think about damp and mold, right? We know we've got loads of houses, social houses across our city who are really suffering with damp and mold. It's been exacerbated through climate change because of extreme heat and the weathers. It's only going to get worse. Actually, by addressing the issue of damp and mold, particularly about making sure that we've got the right level of retrofit, it's a great health outcome as well, right? Our residents live healthier lives as well. So there's so much co-benefits that come with making sure that we're moving towards a much more greener and fairer city.
Absolutely, and I think it's great that green skills offer a more practical avenue for people to utilise their worries about the environment in a sort of constructive way. So when you look back in years to come, what do you hope to feel you've achieved in relation to London's climate goals?
Look, I spent my whole life saying, if only you could get to a position where you can make a difference. And now I'm in a position where I can make a difference. Key focus area for me is about how do we help support some Londoners, particularly around some of our most vulnerable residents, particularly around their energy bills. That is a huge, huge area for me, partly because I think it's a big issue, particularly around cost of living. And that's something that in the next 2-3 years, what I really want to do is really at scale, think about actually putting hundreds of pounds into the pockets of some of our most vulnerable residents. So energy efficiency is a big, big part for me. And also making sure that we're helping support some of our more elderly residents, particularly during the winter, so they're not having to make those difficult decisions around whether they're heating or eating. So making sure our homes are protected. Another key area for me is around making sure in terms of like, and this is what we talk about adaptation, is making sure that as we do have more extreme heat, for example, or flash floods, is really rolling out what we're doing around street trees to cool the temperatures of our streets, so really improving, increasing tree canopy across our city. What we're doing around sustainable urban drainage systems, which are like called SUDs, and these basically like slow down the filtration of our water, the rain when it falls, and it stops flooding, but also cleans our waterways as well. So there's so much that I want to do, but fundamentally the key thing that I want to really do is making sure that the benefits of the green transition are tangible, and it means real things to real people. So it's not just like, I think sometimes going back to the conversation what we have around green skills and green jobs, is like we talk a lot about these things from a very theoretical perspective, and like people really find it difficult to visualize what it is that we're actually talking about. So I think what I really want to achieve in the next 2-3 years is doing practical things that help people and they really feel it.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mete, for joining us and talking about green skills. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you for having me.
No worries.